The UFC's Iowa Fight Night card is about a week and a half away, and at this point, it seems like we're going to be getting back-to-back really solid fight nights outside of the Apex. This upcoming weekend, we have Ian Gary taking on Carlos Prates. Then the card I'm covering in today's video, Cory Sandhagen main eventing against Deiveson Figueiredo, and a bunch of just really solid fights throughout the rest of the card. So I'm going to be going through, giving my full card predictions, main card and the prelims, picking the winner, and then how I think they get it done. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. And then would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your picks in the comments. If you agree, disagree with my calls, let me hear it. But let's just dive right into the first matchup here. We have Juliana Miller taking on Ivana Petrovic. Also, we'll mention timestamps down below if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups. But Juliana Miller was kind of interesting coming into the UFC. Not that she was ever viewed as like some sort of like great prospect, but she was coming in off The Ultimate Fighter, and she pretty much like won all her tough fights by just outdogging every other woman on there. So like she's going to fight with a crazy high pace. She has very good cardio. She had been proven to be fairly durable, but she has just been extremely inactive. Her last fight was August of 2023, and she was beaten up badly by Luana Santos, just tagged over and over again on the feet. And it was like she spent the last like 2-3 minutes of the first round just completely rocked before she was finished. She's coming into this fight with a 3-3 pro record, which is pretty rare to see in the UFC, like someone 500 or worse, but that's where we're at. She is like a capable grappler if she can get it going. Like I mentioned, you know, she does have the cardio. She fights like a dog, but the striking is just so bad. Like technically it's just rough. And then she doesn't really have the wrestling to set up, you know, her offensive jiu-jitsu. But she's going to go out there. She's going to get into a dogfight. And if the other person can kind of wilt under her pressure, she's going to have a shot to win. On the other side here with Petrovic, she's going to come in and want to grapple. She's 1-2 in the UFC, but in those 3 fights, she has attempted 16 total takedowns. I don't think she's like a great striker, but I still think she's significantly cleaner than Juliana Miller in this matchup. So I'm going to go with Petrovic by decision. It's just tough. I think Miller's been dealing with injuries. That's why she's been out. Coming off a long layoff, a 3-3 professional fighter. I have to side with Petrovic here with a decision win. Then moving up to middleweight, we have Azamat Bekoev taking on Ryan Loder. Pretty fun matchup here on the prelims. Both guys who I think are very entertaining. Loder is the most recent tough winner. He's a really impressive grappler, looks to wrestle, land his nasty ground and pound. 5 of his 7 wins are by knockout, and he had a dominant win in the Ultimate Fighter finale. He outlanded Robert Valentin 42-1 in significant strikes. He avoided Valentin's submission attempts and then just finished it in the crucifix, I believe, with a nasty ground and pound. On the feet, he's a southpaw, pretty loose striker, likes to rip his body kicks. He really doesn't hate if you're trying to initiate the grappling, so he'll throw these big exchanges even if it gets him, you know, into a clinch or someone will try to take him down because he's fine in that realm. Don't really love his striking. I feel like if the wrestling isn't working, I do think he's a little bit vulnerable on the feet. Just a little loose, a little bit wild. I do think there are openings for him to potentially get caught. On the other side here with Bekoev, he is way more experienced than Ryan Loder. He is 19-3 as a pro. In his UFC debut, took it on short notice, I think against Zachary Reese. Ground and pound knockout, pretty brutal, put him out. Kind of was helped out with some shots to the back of the head, but if they're not going to call it, it is what it is. He's a very well-rounded fighter, 7 knockouts, 8 submissions, 4 decision wins. When we look at Ryan Loder's wins, he's able to go in there and just steamroll dudes on the ground. I don't see him doing that to Bekoev. I just think he's too good of a wrestler, too well-rounded, too experienced to just get dominated in that way. And so if this fight takes place on the feet for, you know, long stretches here, I think Bekoev has a real advantage. I still think Loder's durable. I think, you know, he can make this fight dirty if he wants to. But my pick is going to be Bekoev by decision. Then for this next fight, I hope this one gets bumped up to the main card, you know, before the fight that actually takes place. Marina Rodriguez versus Gillian Robertson. Like, Gillian Robertson should not be fighting on like the early prelims when you have Tuco, Tukkos, and Junior Tafa at heavyweight, you know, fighting on the main card. That's crazy. But in this matchup here between Rodriguez and Robertson, on paper, this is just a really tough matchup for Marina. She has really struggled with people going out there and grappling her. Virna racked up 12 minutes of control time against her in a 15-minute fight. Andrade was able to bank 4 minutes. Lucindo, 5 minutes. She's a good striker, you know, can fight at a high pace. throw a lot of volume out there when she's comfortable, but she has just really struggled in recent fights with getting taken and held down. And then the other side here, Gillian Robertson has a great ground game. She's the most submission wins by a woman fighter in the UFC with 7. She has very good control grappling. She's a submission threat, active with her ground and pound, just blends it all together very well, where she's not making like huge risks to give up her position, but if the submission opening is there, she'll take it, she'll stay active on the ground. Just a pretty tough experience if she's on top of you. And then she's 12-6 in the UFC. She has finished 9 of those 12 wins, which is very impressive, finishing the best level of competition. She can kind of struggle in the wrestling department. So if she can get you down, she can hold you down, she can, land shots, threaten the submissions, but she only has a 39% takedown accuracy. And when you compare her wins and her losses, you can see the difference in how effective her wrestling was. In her wins, she averages 2.3 takedowns per fight. In her losses, she's under 1 at 0.8. So I do think that if this fight stays standing and Marina's, able to stuff the shots of Gillian, I think Marina's going to pick Robertson apart on the feet. She's not an awful striker, but you can tell it's like not where she wants to be. And Marina is a very good striker, but I also think that if Gillian can land a takedown, like good luck, because I think she's just going to ragdoll Marina around. So I'm going to side with Gillian Robertson here. I just think she's had the more impressive recent performances. Marina Rodriguez really hasn't proven to me that she's made like leaps and strides in the grappling department. So I'm going to go with Gillian Robertson by decision. I think, Rodriguez is going to be durable. I think there are going to be moments where she's on the feet. I don't think this is going to be like 15 minutes of control time. If it was, I think Gillian probably finds a finish. But my pick is going to be Robertson by decision. This next matchup is going to take place at bantamweight, where we have Gaston Bolanos taking on Quang Lee. And I was actually really impressed with Bolanos' last win. He's known as a striker, but he went up against Cortavius Romeus, who's someone who goes out there, just imposes his fight right away, pushes a relentless grappling pace, which like on paper isn't something that you think Bolanos would deal with super well. He, really held up in the grappling department. He still got taken down, was controlled for a little bit, but he was able to reverse Romeus. He was able to land the bigger shots when they were actually in the grappling exchanges. And so I thought that was pretty impressive. He, lost to Marcus McGee in his one UFC loss, but like McGee was pretty much running through everyone who wasn't like a top 15 caliber fighter. So he has a 2-1 record. On the other side with Lee, he is 0-2 in the UFC, has a decision loss to Chris Gutierrez, and then was knocked out to Xiao Long. So I expect Lee to come in here, try to grapple. I just really do like what I saw from Bolanos in his last fight. I think he's going to hold up in that area. I don't see him getting held down for extended periods of time. And then I do expect him to win the exchanges on the feet. He's certainly not an Ilia Topuria level striker, but he just has like that Ilia Topuria look. Not necessarily even in his style, just the way the dude looks out there. So I'm going to go with Bolanos here. I think he gets the decision win. Then moving up to heavyweight, we have a pretty gross matchup here between Dontel Mayes and Thomas Petersen. Mayes is going to have a massive size advantage in this matchup. He's a big heavyweight, 6'6", with a 81-inch reach. On the other side with Petersen, he is 6'1", with a 74-inch reach. I don't really think either guy is all that skilled in this matchup. Mayes just doesn't really have an identity where he's kind of fine participating in like these lower volume striking battles, doesn't really have a consistent wrestling attack, and really just doesn't do a good job of like leveraging his physical advantages. He is a super tall fighter with a huge reach, and he just doesn't really make the most of it. On the other side with Petersen, he's less physically gifted, but I feel like he at least comes off as like a hard worker in the octagon, where he'll try to wrestle, he will keep a pace on the feet for the heavyweight weight class. I don't think either guy has a ton of finishing upside. It's heavyweight, so obviously, both guys could finish the other one, but neither guy are known to be like elite finishers. So I kind of just trust Petersen's urgency more than Mayes. If we're getting into like one of these gross, sloppy heavyweight fights, I just trust that Petersen's going to go out there and pretty much give his 100%, and I just don't know if I can get that out of Dontel Mayes. So I'm going to go with Petersen by decision. Next up, a fight I am very excited for. Cameron Smotherman taking on Serhiy Sidey, a bantamweight matchup here. I think this is going to be a really fun fight. Smotherman had a very impressive debut, took it on short notice against Jake Hadley, who's a very solid fighter, and won just like a clear decision, came in, picked up a big win. He is most known for his boxing, very clean, works the body well. I will point out he's a little bit chinny, but has like very odd durability. So in his, I think his only Dana White Contender Series fight, he was KO'd in a minute. But the way he gets dropped, like it looks like he's out, and then the ref steps in, and then it's like he's magically fine, and it looks like nothing even happened. In his third pro fight, he was knocked out in just 13 seconds. And so like the fight starts, he gets dropped by a jab, he gets back up, then the dude lands an overhand, and he pretty much face plants. Like it looks like he's out. The ref jumps in, and then he calls the fight, and then he looks completely fine. Like he just stands right up and is like ready to go, like doesn't even look wobbled. It's very odd. But I mean, the fact that he does like go out or looks like he's out at some point is obviously not great, because like those fights could definitely get stopped. But if he does get dropped, I do kind of trust his recoverability. It's just very, very weird. Chins in MMA are just kind of odd, where like certain dudes, they never get rocked, but if you do rock them, it's like they're completely incompetent. Some dudes get dropped and it's like they're just completely fine and they have their wits about them. On the other side here with Serhiy Sidey, kind of a weird start to his UFC career. I think you can make the argument that both of his first two fights were robberies. Maybe not that extreme, but I think they both were, kind of rough decisions. I thought he won his rematch against Roman Tavares. He lost his debut. I thought Garrett Armfield beat him. He won that fight next. So I do think he should be 1-1. I think it should probably be in the opposite order that it occurred, but it is what it is. He is a huge bantamweight, 5'11", 72-inch reach, great long weapons, uses them well, front kicks, jabs, his straight rights. I'm expecting a striking dogfight here. I think if one of them's going to mix in the wrestling, it would probably be Sidey, but I don't know if he's going to have a ton of success there. I think these guys are going to go in. I think they're going to test each other's chins, and I just kind of prefer Sidey's durability here. I think it's more proven. Not that he can't get hurt or not that he can't get knocked out. We saw him get hurt a couple of times in the Roman Tavares fight, but I do think his chin's just proven to be a little bit more resilient here. So I'm actually going to go with Serhiy Sidey, like round 2 knockout. I think he finds the finish, and I think he gets it done in the second. Then I think right now this is the final prelim matchup here. We have Yana Santos taking on Miesha Tate. The return of Miesha Tate, last time she fought was December of 2023, actually picked up a submission win against Julia Avila. So in her last fight, looked pretty good. She had like her first, kind of return here in 2021. So she's fought 4 times in the last 4 years. She's definitely at her best when she can have success in the wrestling department. Since her return, in her wins, she has gone 3 for 6 and 4 for 5 on her takedowns. In her losses, she has gone 1 for 6 and 0 for 7. So if she can't wrestle, it's probably not going to be great. If she can, I think she can have some success. On the feet, if this is just entirely a striking fight, I think Yana Santos will win the exchanges, but she's kind of struggled with defending takedowns. She only has a 42% takedown defense. This is honestly a fight that I feel like has split decision written all over it, where it's going to be like half the round is Santos outpointing her on the feet, and then the other half is going to be Miesha Tate like clinching, landing some shots, maybe finding a takedown, landing minimal ground and pound, and it's just going to be a nightmare for, the refs, officiating this one. So I'm going to lean towards Miesha Tate by decision, but I am expecting it to be very, very close. I think she just gets enough of the wrestling going where she can win a decision. Now, starting off the main card, we have the return of Jeremy Stephens to the UFC, taking on Mason Jones. Overall, this is just like very unique booking. You typically don't see guys like getting up there in age, kind of leave the UFC or get cut, whatever the situation was, and then like fighting a bunch of other like, competitor promotions and then come back and just like get an opportunity to fight in your hometown. But he ended his UFC run on an 0-5 and then 1-0 contest run. So he was not doing well. He was, losing a bunch of fights. He goes to the PFL, only goes 1-2 there. He has a boxing fight against Jose Aldo, which ends in a draw. He boxes Chris Avila, who's like someone from Nate Diaz's team. He loses to him, and Avila's not a super impressive boxer. Then he goes to BKFC, had kind of found his lane, and went 3-0, including a knockout against Eddie Alvarez in his last fight. So Stephens is going to go out there. He's going to throw powerful punches. As you guys might know, he's proclaimed himself to be the hardest hitting 145er, which Conor McGregor did not agree with. But he is going to be undersized here at 155. He's, since moved up. His prime was at 145. This fight's taking place at lightweight. It is a hometown matchup for him. I just think it's interesting that he's, get another shot here. On the other side of Mason Jones, kind of also an interesting situation. This is his second UFC stint and the start of it. So he had a ton of hype coming into his UFC debut. He was 10-0, was the Cage Warriors champion, had a couple of title wins over there. He ended up going 1-2 with 1-0 contest in his first 4 fights. And I believe they offered to renew his contract. Now, obviously, I don't know if they were, giving him the same bad contract or whatever it was, but he actually opted to go back to Cage Warriors and then try to, work his way back in. And since he's been gone from the UFC, he's gone 4-0 in Cage Warriors with 3 finishes. He's a durable striker, going to push a solid pace, kind of get in your face. Very dangerous if he can get you up against the cage. He will unload his combinations. And then also a capable grappler, and then still very young at 29 years old. I just think these two are in very different stages of their career. I have a tough time trusting someone who finished their UFC run losing, 5 of their last 6 fights, and the other one was a no contest, and then leaves the UFC, doesn't really find success in other organizations until you get to BKFC. So not great for Stephens here. I don't think Mason Jones is some sort of future top 15 guy in the weight class, but I think he gets this one done, and I think he gets it done by decision. Now, continuing on with the main card here, we have another really fun matchup. Montel Jackson taking on Daniel Marcos, a bantamweight fight. I think Montel Jackson has been way overdue for a top 15 shot. He has 5 straight wins, 3 round 1 knockouts during that streak. He's gone 8-1 in his last 9 UFC fights. Honestly, the problem has just been his inactivity. He had 2 fights in 2021, 1 fight in 2022, 1 fight in 2023, and then 1 fight in 2024. So he really has just not been able to get that momentum going. And the UFC is not going to be super willing to give someone a shot at the rankings if they don't think they're actually going to be active within the weight class. He is a massive bantamweight, 5'10", with a 75.5-inch reach. I think you could make a case that he is the hardest hitter at 135. Maybe Figgy should probably get that, but I do think he's one of the hardest hitters. He has 9 knockdowns in his last 5 fights, and he has landed a knockdown in each of his last 7. So just consistently, having his power known. On the other side here with Daniel Marcos, 17-0 as a pro, so undefeated. He's 4-0 in the UFC, well-rounded striker, solid boxing, good kicks. I think he blends his punches and kicks very well in combination. And then he works all 3 levels, head, body, legs. Occasionally mixes in his wrestling, but it's typically just to stamp around. Not something he's going to go to a ton. In this matchup, I do favor the power and the physicality of Montel Jackson. I just think he has that fight-ending ability that I don't think Daniel Marcos has. So I think if these two are on the feet striking, I think the rounds are going to be pretty competitive, but I think Montel Jackson is the guy who can really stamp them by hurting him, dropping him, or potentially knocking him out in this matchup. So I'm going to go with Montel Jackson by decision. I don't think he finishes Marcos here, but I do think he gets the win. Then we have the heavyweight fight that I mentioned. Probably shouldn't be on the main card. Maybe we get a knockout, but if not, it's going to be a gross fight. Junior Tafa taking on Tuco. Tukkos. Tukkos has had a couple of fights in the UFC and then 1 fight on road to the UFC. On road to the UFC, he was knocked out by Minyang Zhang. He's the dude that's fighting the week before. If you're watching this, that fight might have already happened against Anthony Smith. But Tukkos was a huge favorite in that fight. I want to say -500, -600, and Minyang Zhang just went in there, knocked him out. Since then, he was submitted by Umar Sy in his UFC debut, and then lost a very clear decision against Nahavo Sterling. So he's been fighting at light heavyweight, now moving up to heavyweight, and I don't love it. I mean, he was already a pretty soft-looking light heavyweight. Seems like now he can just be extra lazy, just walk in there, kind of collect a paycheck. But on the other side, Junior Tafa is also someone who probably should be fighting at light heavyweight. He's not great. He does have some pop on the feet, but his grappling is terrible. He has a bad gas tank. When the fight's not going his way and he's not able to just go in there and stand, I don't think he wants to be there. In his last fight, he did get a round 2 knockout, but he was taken down with maybe 20, 30 seconds left in the first. And I think if there was 10 more seconds, he was wilting. I think he would have been fine getting a ground and pound finish. Kind of got saved by the bell, came back, won in the second round. I think Tuco should look to wrestle in this matchup. He did land 3 takedowns against Sterling in his last fight, but kind of similar to Tafa, in his last fight, it did not look like he wanted to be there against Nahavo Sterling. I actually got to see that one in person. I think it was the Tampa card, And like, sure, he was, trying for takedowns, but like, he had no interest in winning that fight. Once he realized it wasn't going his way, it was just like, all right, how do I not get knocked out? How do I get myself out of here, after 15 minutes? So I think this fight could go either way. I'm going to lean towards Junior Tafa round 1 knockout, but I would not be shocked if, Tafa goes out there, gets wrestled, fades, and then Tukkos could find a finish. Next up, we're going to have Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on D-Rod here. And with Ponzinibbio, every time I see him fight, I just think about what he could have been before he had his health issues. At one point, he was 9-2 in the UFC on a 7-fight win streak. In 2018, his last fight before his kind of layoff, he had a knockout win against Neil Magny. And this was a much better version of Neil Magny, than we have right now. He returns in 2021, so a 3-year layoff, and has kind of just had mixed results. He's gone 3-5. 3 of those losses have been split decision, so he's been in some competitive fights, but his durability has definitely faded. He has been knocked down in 3 of his last 4 fights. He's 38 years old, getting up there in age, but still very dangerous, very powerful on the feet. On the other side here with Daniel Rodriguez, he's going to go out there, he's going to want to stand and bang, just like Ponzinibbio. Kind of shockingly, he's 38 years old. I thought he was a little bit younger. Hasn't been in the UFC for a super long time. At least, not long enough to be 38. But he's getting up there also. Hasn't looked great in some of his recent fights. He's lost 3 of his last 4. He's coming off a very close split decision win against Alex Morono. He has proven to have plus durability. The only time he's been knocked out in his career was against Ian Gary. But I also think he has less pop to actually take advantage of Santiago Ponzinibbio's decreasing durability, where he's not going to go out there and land these huge shots consistently. He hasn't landed a knockdown in his last 9 UFC fights. So could he knock out Ponzinibbio? Sure. I don't know if I want to bank on it. It's kind of weird. We have one dude with a lot of power, not a great chin, another dude with not a ton of power, but a pretty solid chin. So I think this one's going to go the distance. I think it's going to be a close striking fight. I'm just slightly leaning towards Santiago Ponzinibbio here. I think if he doesn't get rocked, doesn't get finished, I think he can land the bigger shots, and I think he wins a decision. Now we've arrived at the co-main event where we have Reinier de Ridder taking on Bo Nickel. I think this is kind of interesting matchmaking because this is a pretty similar dynamic to the Bo Nickel-Paul Craig fight, which wasn't super entertaining to watch. Don't think the fans loved that one. Nickel didn't get a great response from that fight, but it's, a matchup where you have an elite wrestler in Bo Nickel taking on someone with elite jiu-jitsu in Reinier de Ridder. Now, sometimes these can lead to amazing grappling fights where the wrestler tries to wrestle, the jiu-jitsu guy's threatening with a ton of submissions, and it can be super fun. It can also lead to kind of a sloppy, lower quality striking fight, which is what we saw in the Bo Nickel-Paul Craig fight. So we saw Bo Nickel be content to strike in this matchup where he didn't attempt a single takedown against Paul Craig. And I do think he won the fight, but wouldn't consider it to be super impressive. He's still raw on the feet. He's pretty stiff. He's going to be throwing his jabs, low kicks, his overhands. He does, try to switch stances. You can see he's definitely in the gym working. Also stays pretty safe when he is on the feet. I think what was so interesting about the Paul Craig matchup is I think we kind of got a little glimpse into what his true upside could be, or what his upside would be in the UFC, where you could make a case where he's going to have this great wrestling, but he really comes around as a striker, is able to learn super quickly, and he's someone where he could potentially stand with some of the top 185ers. Obviously, the wrestling would be his bread and butter, but he wouldn't be super reliant on it. With what we saw in the Paul Craig fight, unless we're getting some massive improvements, I think he's going to need to be a Khabib level wrestler where you're just going to go out there, have to push a relentless wrestling pace, and you have to win in that area, because I don't think the striking is going to hold up if you're standing for minutes with guys DDP, even a Kyle Bohalio, some of those top guys at 185. I don't think he's going to fare super well at this point, just in terms of his striking ability. On the other side here with RDR, he's a lot looser on the feet. I wouldn't say he's a much better striker. They're just very different. Bo Nickel is very tense, very stiff. RDR is very loose, but very hittable, not super technical. He has very bad defense. He's pretty labored on the feet. The way he fights from round 1 is how someone fights in round 5 in a championship fight if they're just completely exhausted. So he can take some shots and be fine. Obviously, you don't like betting on that, but so far in the UFC, his durability has kind of held up here. In this fight, I think Bo Nickel is going to have the power advantage. Even though he's not perfect on the feet, I do think he kind of just hits like a tank. He's a big dude. We saw him knock out, who is it? Was it Val Woodburn? Like super early on in a fight, just put him out pretty clean. Or not his UFC debut, his pro debut. It was not against a good fighter, but still, you saw the power on display. I do think RDR is going to open up more than Paul Craig did. Paul Craig was very fine, fighting this strike for strike battle on the feet. He's also someone who's not really known for his striking, so I think he was having some success and thought it was a solid fight. So for RDR, I do think he's going to be a little bit more aggressive. I think he's going to try to push a pace more than Paul Craig did. But I would still favor Bo Nickel in the grappling. Like maybe he doesn't want to grapple, but if this fight is taking place on the mat, I think it's going to be because Bo is dictating it. Like I don't think RDR is going to be like, all right, I want to take this fight to the ground. I'm going to take him down. I want to threaten with my offensive jiu-jitsu. I just don't think he has that capability because Bo Nickel's just not going to let him get there. If the fight's on the ground, it's going to be because Bo Nickel initiated the takedown. Now, there's questions on whether or not that would be, a good thing for him. Does he have the submission defense at this point in his career? But if the fight's on the ground, it's going to be because Bo wants it there. And so I actually think Bo Nickel's going to find a knockout. I could see it on the feet, could see it with some ground and pound. I trust his submission defense with what we've seen. Like his submission offense looks pretty good, so I assume defensively he has to be at a decent level. And I do think he could catch him on the feet, even though he is still raw as a striker. RDR really puts himself out there. His chin's up. He's vulnerable to get hit. So I'm going to go with Bo Nickel round 1 knockout. I do think it's an interesting fight. I do think it's interesting they went back to this similar archetype of matchup, but Nickel round 1 will be my prediction. And then we have arrived at the main event here. Cory Sandhagen taking on Deiveson Figueiredo. This is just a really strong main event. To be honest, I'm pretty big fans of both these guys. I think Sandhagen is really, really good. Same thing with Deiveson Figueiredo. What I really like about Sandhagen is he's really kind of rounded out his game over the last few years. We know he has a big bantamweight frame, 5'11", 70-inch reach. He fights very well from the outside. I think he might have the best footwork in the division. Great crashing in, switching stances, moving laterally, circling around the cage. He's very defensively responsible, where it's going to be tough to hit him very clean. I feel like recently the only guy who's done it is probably Petr Yan, where he rocked him in their interim title fight. But Petr Yan obviously is an amazing striker. And then what I kind of mentioned, where he's consistently making these improvements, is he has started to mix in his wrestling. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to use it in this fight. I think he's going to be pretty content to stay on the feet, but he's not going to go in there and have an ego battle of, I'm the better striker, right? He could have done that against Song Yadong. He could have done that against Chito Vera. He could have done that against Rob Font, and he probably would have won all those matchups, but he helps himself out because he's going to mix in the wrestling. It's another thing these guys have to think about, and I just like that he's someone who's really gone out there, put in the work to, kind of round out his overall skill set. I also think in the Umar fight, even though he was out grappled, he was controlled for a little bit. I thought, he showed some great wrestling defense in that fight. Obviously not good enough to get the win, but I still thought it was a pretty impressive performance in that area. I think maybe the only criticism or negative of this current Cory Sandhagen is I feel like he is kind of lessened his fight ending ability, where in some of these really tough matchups against some of the best guys in the world, you have to take some risks and throw some shots that can actually lead to finishes. It's great winning every single round, but it's going to be tough to outpoint a guy in the feet like Umar or Merab, where they're going to have the wrestling, the grappling edge against you, like we saw in the Frankie Edgar fight, right? He's throwing these flying knees. Same thing against Tito Dillashaw. You're seeing the wheel kicks against Marlon Moraes, and I just think he's limited those a little bit in the hopes of being just a little bit too perfect. It's kind of a minor criticism, but I will throw it out there. On the other side with Deiveson Figueiredo here, he's just so well-rounded, good wrestling, good submission offense, hits like an absolute tank. He's the only man in the UFC to ever drop Pantoja, and he's the only man in the UFC to ever drop Chito Vera. So the power is legit. We did see him wrestle Petr Yan early in their most recent fight. Had some success. He's 3-1 since moving up to bantamweight. I just think this is a tough matchup for Figgy. He's going to be at an extreme size disadvantage in this matchup. He is going to be the way shorter man. And so I just have a tough time seeing him really dominate in the wrestling where he's controlling, Sandhagen for multiple rounds. I don't know if he has the cardio to like consistently wrestle for 5. I'm actually pretty confident that he does not. And so I just think Cory's going to stay on the outside. I think he's going to rack up a ton of volume on the feet. Like I said, he has been pretty durable. So like, could Figgy win? Could he catch him in a submission? Could he drop him and finish him? Sure. I just think if they fight 100 times, Sandhagen is going to win a lot of them. So I'm going to go with Sandhagen by decision. I think he gets back in the win column and kind of puts himself right back in the title picture. So that is going to wrap it up for the UFC Iowa full card predictions. Let me know your thoughts down below. Drop your picks. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.